21st.
Thank you. Welcome to this evening's meeting of the November 21st meeting of the Norfolk Select Board. Let's start this evening by facing the flag and saying the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And we are going to start this evening with any public comment. So if anybody out there, nobody electronically, just the Select Board Zoo. Awesome. So I'm going to move on to number 2. Please consider the vote for the use classification.
So this is the town's annual classification of tax purposes. With us, we have our assessor, Dawn Clark, who's going to give a presentation. And I just do want to highlight, Todd and Chris and the work that goes into this presentation, as well as the Board of Assessors. But Dawn will give that presentation now.
Thank you.
Welcome.
What's that? Okay, so the purpose of tonight's meeting is to consider whether to continue with the single tax rate or go to a split tax rate, and whether or not to accept one of the 3 state-allowed exemptions. The town of Norfolk currently has 93% residential, 5% commercial and industrial, 2% personal property. Due to these percentages, splitting the tax rate will put a heavier burden on the commercial industrial property throughout the town, with minimal relief to the residential properties. It is important to remember the majority of the personal property taxes that are paid within the town are also paid by the commercial and industrial properties as well. Therefore, a shift to a split rate would cause a larger impact on our businesses throughout town, which could influence some of the commercial industrial businesses to leave. So the purpose of tonight's classification hearing, the Select Board must hold a classification hearing each year to consider the tax rate options available to the town under property tax classification. The Board of Assessors will make a recommendation to the Select Board whether to establish different rates among major property classes: residential, commercial, industrial, and personal property. Setting the values. The assessed residential value is based on comparable sales market analysis of the prior year's sales. The assessed commercial value is based on income and expense, as well as comparable sales analysis and cost analysis. The Department of Revenue annually approves the adjusted values proposed by the Assessor's Office. There is currently 4,200 properties in the town with hundreds of distinct components that make up the assessed value. In order to keep this data as fresh and accurate as possible, the Assessor's Office this year will have inspected and measured over 148 qualified sales from 2021, and also compiled and evaluated income and expense information along with forms of lists for all the commercial properties. Setting the tax rate. Massachusetts statute requires the assessors to assess all property at its full and fair cash value as of January 1st of each year. Interim year adjustments are adjustments from the market sales analysis during non-certification years. Full property reevaluation, also known as certification, is required and completed every 5 years. The town of Norfolk is currently in an interim year. Your tax rate is derived from total taxable real estate and personal property, town meeting appropriations, state aid, town revenues, town expenditures, new growth, debt exclusion, and overrides. What is new growth? New growth is assessed by tracking all the new construction, additions, subdivisions, condos, and any properties that return, exempt properties that return to the tax rolls throughout the town. This past year, there were over 250 permits, many of which were required a visit from the assessor's office to evaluate the work that had been done, then determining if these changes could be considered growth by the Department of Revenue's guidelines. This next slide represents the total growth from year to year. The Assessor's Office has been working extremely hard on our growth for the past few years now, visiting properties that haven't been visited in the past 7 to 9 years, finding construction that was never picked up or never permitted, and the rest of the growth has come from new construction. The more current and accurate the data is, the more fair and equitable it is for every resident throughout town. You can also see that the tax rate, which hasn't been this low since 2011, this is due to high property values, growth, and controlled spending as determined by the residents at town meeting. The overall assessed values of the town has increased by 16.1% from the previous year. This was a great year for homeowners that were selling their properties due to low interest rates and low inventory. This screen represents the tax levy that the town would have raised in property taxes. This number comes from the total amount to be raised minus the total estimated receipts. This slide is a breakdown of the different classes' valuation and percent of each class. As you can see, the residential class represents approximately 93% of the total value of the town. This is a breakdown of the impact of splitting the tax rate. There is a very small benefit to splitting the tax rate to the residential class because of the lack of commercial and industrial in the town of Norfolk. This is an example of the actual dollar amounts that would be saved in black for the residential class with a split rate at 1.1, 1.3, and 1.5. Commercial and industrial properties would have to pay additional taxes in red. As you can see, there is a very small savings in tax dollars to the residential class, while significantly increasing the burden on commercial and industrial properties, possibly causing them to relocate to another town. The first of the 3 exemptions for the board to consider tonight is open space exemption. The open space exemption discount is a process which allows cities and towns to grant a tax break to those properties that are classified as open space, not to be confused with open space in Chapter 61 program. The Board of Assessors has consistently encouraged classification under 61A and 61, which enables property owners greater discount of taxes and gives the town the benefits of at least 5 to 10 acre minimum lot sizes. They are actively devoted to this type of classification. In addition to these benefits, the town has the right of first refusal to purchase any of these properties. The second of these exemptions is a small commercial exemption. Who is eligible? What is the criteria that is required? Sole proprietor and partnerships, no more than 10 employees. Total value of the property cannot exceed $1 million. Business must be certified by the Department of Labor and Workforce Development. If a parcel has multiple tenants, all must be eligible businesses. The intent is to give a tax reduction to small commercial property owners at the expense of larger commercial and industrial properties. Up to 10% of the commercial levy can be shifted to eligible parcels to the non-eligible parcels. The things to consider: if the business doesn't own the building, the tax benefit goes to the property owner, not to the small business owner. It's difficult to track, And at this time, there are only 14 out of the 351 communities statewide that have adopted this small commercial exemption. The third exemption is the residential exemption. Adopting the residential exemption can shift the tax burden within the residential class from lower-priced homes to owners of non-owner-occupied second homes. The total tax levy of the class remains the same. The town of Norfolk is mainly owner-occupied, therefore not a good candidate for this exemption. The residential exemption is geared more towards the 15 communities listed below. The residential exemption of up to 20% of the average assessed value of all the residential properties may be granted to qualified owner-occupied residents. These are the current 15 of 351 communities that have adopted this exemption: Barnstable, Boston, Brookline, Cambridge, Chelsea, Everett, Malden, Nantucket, Providencetown, Somerville, Tisbury, Waltham, Watertown, Wellfleet, and Truro. Contrary to what the general public may think, neither the Select Board or the Assessor's Office can raise or lower the tax rate. Spending is determined by voting public through town meeting. It is the participation of the town residents at town meeting that determines the level of services desired. This, in turn, directly affects the tax rate. The actual levy, divided by the total assessed value, multiplied by 1,000, will be the tax rate for 2023. It is extremely important to know that this tax rate could still be subject to change after final approval from the Department of Revenue. So tonight, the Board of Assessors makes a recommendation that the Select Board vote to adopt the single tax rate, vote not to adopt the open space, vote not to adopt the residential exemption, and vote not to adopt the small commercial exemption. This concludes my presentation, and I'll entertain any questions.
Thank you very much. Very thorough. I have a couple questions. You want to go first, or would you like me to?
You go right ahead.
So I'm just going to go back through just things I jotted down. First one is just a curiosity.
Yep.
When is the next revaluation period?
2025.
Thank you. The next question was about you were talking about what constitutes new growth and whether it's adding on to a property, like doing something like that, or a whole new building. Do you have a sense of how much of it is new construction?
For this past year, you mean?
Yes, please.
There were quite a few condominiums this past year. We had quite a few subdivision condominiums, and they were actually split. They were condominiums and single families combined in the same complexes. So I don't have an exact percentage. I don't want to give you a bad number. But I think
more than 50%.
Oh, yeah, more than 50% of it was new construction. Absolutely.
Awesome. The tax rate going down is exciting, so I think that that's something hopefully we can celebrate with our residents. But then I was noticing, I guess the one exemption I had questions about was open space. And in the other open space, you said 15 out of 300 or 14 out of, what percentage of the communities do the open space exemption?
Open space exemption? So I had,
It's 14 communities.
yeah, out of 351,
That's 4%.
4%.
4%, the same as the other exemptions.
Pretty much.
Pretty much the same as the other exemptions.
Yes. And what was the other question?
And no, that was, and then our other towns, just for my learning, are other towns on a split rate? Like, or is it some towns are and some towns aren't, and it's,
It all depends on your commercial base.
right, so someplace like Foxborough wouldn't have a split, or would have a split rate.
do, yes.
But we would have, because we're more residential, do not have a
Exactly.
split rate. And then,
think Rentham, Plainville, if you're talking about the general vicinity of where we are, both have split rates, but Millis, Medfield, us, we don't have the split rate.
Medway.
So, Medway's a good question.
Just as a note,
Medway
Department
doesn't.
of Revenue suggests to us at various meetings that if you're, they like to see closer to 15% commercial before you even think about it.
Yeah.
We're at whatever we're at, 7 with our commercial and industrial.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're not close.
Thank you. Do you have any questions?
Just if you have the data point in front of you, Don, do you happen to know how many single-family parcels we recorded this last year in total?
New single-family parcels?
Total.
Total single-family? I do not have that number.
No worries. It was just more.
I can get that for you.
It was more of a curiosity thing
Sure.
more than anything else.
Sure.
The big things that I took out of this was obviously the huge jump in the average home value. I mean, we just barely crossed over the 500 threshold not 1 or 2 years ago. Now we just jettisoned over 600
Yes.
in the course of a year.
Yes.
One of the things that I typically use when talking to residents about the perception that we have the ability to manage the tax rate as a number is to, instead of focus so much on the rate, focus on the average family tax bill, right? Because that's a better apples to apples type measure.
Sure.
And I just did the quick math over here, and it looks like you had mentioned here as well, it's $10,021 is our tax bill, which is the first time that we are crossing that $10,000 threshold. But it's only an increase of $271 year over year, whereas last year that was $401, and in years past it was somewhere in the mid threes. So it's definitely not the huge jump that we were expecting, but crossing over that 10,000 threshold.
That's right.
It is a milestone. I don't know if it's a good one or a bad one, but it's a milestone nonetheless. The other thing I will note is that jump in the rate of the average single-family value was about 14%. I know that you talked about the increase being 16% as a whole for all parcels in the
Right.
town, but the increase in the average family tax bill was only like 2.7%. So it definitely wasn't feeling the full brunt of that increase in value.
That's right.
So I don't think I necessarily had a question more than just wanted to talk for a little while. So
Sure.
appreciate it. Thank you.
Absolutely.
My only other, I always, and I know I asked this last year about open space, and is that something that would encourage that? But because we have the Chapter 61A program, there's already a benefit for that, for open space.
That's right, which is more controlled by the town. The existing open space accounts that we have currently, we're not recognizing them. They have adjustments already previously on them, so they're already depreciated quite a bit in value because they were created when we had subdivisions that got created and those parcels got isolated. So they don't have any frontage or anything, so they're already well adjusted for what they are. So there's no reason for us to allow that as well.
Okay, I don't have any other questions. Do you have any other?
Question from somebody
There is,
online, if you would like to take it. You don't.
I would be fine. Donna?
Hello, thank you very much. Donna Jones, North Street. May have just partially answered my question, but are wetlands different from open space? And do wetlands get a lower tax rate?
It depends on if you're involved in chapter land or is this just a straight up piece of property?
Straight up.
Okay, so we do make adjustments for wetlands. If there's how much acreage do you have?
We probably shouldn't get in a, in a back and forth, Donna.
Okay.
So why, can you forward your questions to us so we're not into a back and forth this way?
As was just mentioned, I understand that for a development where there's open space, that's what's being considered, whether that rate should be different as opposed to a resident that has wetlands. So, thank you. Yes, I will forward my question.
Thank you, Donna. We'll be sure they're answered. Thank you. Any other questions?
Nope, I'm good. Thank you so much for the presentation, the back to front. Todd, Chris, thank you as well.
Thank you, and it was very thorough. Thank you very much. I'll entertain a motion.
I move that the board vote to adopt a single tax rate for fiscal year '23, and further, not to adopt an open space exemption, residential exemption, or small commercial exemption.
Second, all those in favor?
Aye.
And town administrator updates.
Right, tonight it kind of will be brief. I just want to thank the team or notify the board that the town did
Thank you.
receive another grant in the amount that we did mention before, the IT Community Compact Grant. This was a competitive grant that there was more submissions than requests than allocation of funds, and the town did receive that in the amount of $20,000. So we'll put that on the agenda for the board in the next meeting. But in the last couple of weeks, we've received over $86,000 in grant funding. So that's a testament to the team here and submitting these grants and so forth. So I just want to let the board know.
Thank you. Thank you very
Great
much.
work, thank you.
Very good work.
And that's it for the town administrator updates.
Okay. Excellent. Then we have some warrants.
I move that the board approve 3 warrants for the period of November 15th, 2022 through November 18th, 2022, as printed on the agenda for this meeting.
Second, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it. There's no minutes. So that's it.
Motion to adjourn.
Second, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye.